After a slight hiatus, it appears that we are back, sniffling on the trail of another Stephen King adaptation. Before we get into it, though, this episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Scythes. They're not just for death anymore, although I just almost killed you.
Yep.
So they might be.
Yep.
I will say this, though. It's pretty appropriate that Scythes have sponsored us.
It's true.
Because we're following up our last video, which was Pet Sematary 1, with Pet Sematary 2. Now, to be fair, this is not an adaptation.
No.
This is a
Sequel.
standalone sequel. I shouldn't say standalone. It's an original sequel to the movie adaptation. Now, we established previously that you pretty much enjoyed the original adaptation, right?
I didn't hate it, but
Yeah,
I
you
didn't
didn't hate
love it.
And I was...
There was too much that couldn't be avoided, and it was kind of bad.
Yeah. And I was encumbered more by its faults, i.e. the bad acting from the lead.
Yeah.
And most notably for me, how it didn't work as an adaptation, a good adaptation, and how it skipped too much of what was essential for what made the book good for it to be a standalone original version of the book for me. Although previously I had enjoyed the movie. But that being said, I went into this with a little bit of trepidation, kind of like where can this go? This could be incredibly bad. It has an incredibly low rating according to critics. But you did mention that it has kind of like a cult following, among certain circles. Now, before I get to ask you, I'm going to start it off this time. My overall impressions is, fuck, this is a good movie, man. This is a really good... I absolutely love this sequel. It is true to the spirit of the book. It does everything right that the first movie just completely glossed over, we'll get into what I mean by that later. But I was actually really surprised. There are very few faults in this movie that I found glaring enough for me to dislike, which is more than I can say for the adaptation of the book, that is the movie before this one, Pet Sematary. But it is worthy to note that Mary Lambert came back and directed this one, and she actually wanted to make a different movie, which they kind of touch on in the movie. She wanted to follow up literally the Revenant Ellie, the wife from part 1, follow up her story. And they kind of do a little homage to that in the movie with a campfire ghost telling story during Halloween, which was pretty cool. But the studio wasn't too sure. And for once, I gotta say, the studio, for me anyway, was absolutely right about that. So anyway, long story short, I was really surprised by this, and I'm kind of feeling ashamed that I never gave this movie a chance. I never did. This is the first time I've ever seen it. But anyway, what did you think? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Etc.
I was actually going to say that I enjoyed it quite a bit more than the first one. That being said, it's not a perfect movie.
Mm-hmm.
It does have a lot of problems, I would say.
We'll get into that.
But yeah, I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I would say it's more just like fun than anything else. Like, I was ready to, like, if you hate it, I was ready to be like, it's fun. I had a fun time. So yeah, I liked it.
Yeah.
But I mean, here's the thing. It doesn't have a horrible actor that drags the whole movie down the entire time, and that helps a lot.
This is what I'll say. If this had a horrible actor, I would still like this movie. And that's why I say that this got a lot of what the first one didn't get right. Because, and let me add to that by saying, before we get into the essentials of this, Stephen King took his name off this movie. And I don't know if it was in response to the movie. I don't know if he had seen it before it came out. But right before it came out, he took his name off it. He said, I don't want my name on it. So I don't know if that was a response to how the first one came out. Because he did write the script. And as we know from the previous video, they ended up cutting all the stuff that was important to the movie from that script. So maybe he was responding to that. Or I don't know, maybe he got a preview of this and he didn't like it. The point is, the irony of that is that this movie did everything that the other movie did not. And that's, one, it gave you a real grasp on this being Ludlow the town's dirty secret, the Pet Sematary. You understand that people know about it to some degree or another. When we see the original town veterinarian being visited by the new one, which is our main character, or one of our main characters, we get a feel for how permeated the town is with this legend, and through the kids, through the reactions of people to the very idea of somebody going up there. On top of that, what this movie actually did is really give you an ominous sense of the spirit's presence. It never names it as the Wendigo, which I had a real issue with in the first one because I never felt the presence of the thing. It was there, obviously.
It was there, but it was very little.
Yeah,
it was like kind of like. We actually had a discussion after we did the video in which we kind of went into the stuff and kind of like dissected it, and we realized that there is a lot of it, but it's so like poorly put in there that it never makes you think.
It's more like spoon-fed in a dummy kind of way to you. Like, you're supposed to know this, but at the same time, it's not
even there.
It's not. So. Yeah, this one, you know, there's something driving these people to do things, and their motives, and why people are suddenly obsessed with going back and burying more and more. You get a feeling for the spirit, especially through Clancy Brown's character, Gus, the town sheriff. You know he is being driven by the spirit. You know he has a plan. You know he just wants to increase his influence. And then even in other scenes where like the new town veterinarian sees phantoms of his wife, and she's telling him that she can come back, and then all of a sudden it's obvious that the spirit is doing it. And you know, and it's almost feels like an aside until the end of the movie, but that's something that the movie did exceptionally well. It gave you a feeling for how the spirit's influence grows and what it wants to do, which is much more than I can say for the first one. So I thought that was exceptional. Another thing that I thought it got great was that, like any good Stephen King book, even though this is not based on the book, it made it about the town, and it made it about the people, and it kind of gave you more than just one linear story. It actually kind of was a red herring type of thing, because at the beginning...
Yeah, I was going to say that it gives you a main character for like the first half, and then it kind of changes towards the end.
Yeah, and really it's not even the first half, it's like the first third. You're introduced to Edward Furlong.
Yeah,
John
that's
fucking
true,
Connor.
that's true. It kind of shifts.
Yeah, but his mother dies, and his father and him decide to move back to Ludlow. They were residents of this place before. His mom was a famous movie star, so she was kind of like the shining star of the town.
Yeah.
They moved back there to inter her, and they decide to stay there. He sets up his vet shop, and we kind of follow Edward Furlong and it was a great way to introduce you to the people in the town, and then it shifts to his would-be friend rather quickly. You know, I'd say like the first third of the movie. And it becomes about him.
It still kind of shares, like...
Yeah, it does.
His story with...
But it was kind of a red herring because we expected this to go a certain way with him. And it does, but in a very good way that benefits the idea of the spirit's influence at the end. But yeah, it shifts to his friend and his kind of sort of abusive father. And I love the way Clancy Brown portrayed the town sheriff, because he's an asshole, but it creeps up on you. It's a Stephen King standard. The dirty things that hide behind closed doors. Yeah,
he's not that bad at first.
Yes.
You kind of start seeing him more.
I love that. That's very Stephen King, man. And even the little bully kids, very Stephen King. All that stuff was very, very, very rooted in what makes a lot of Stephen King novels great. So I thought that was fantastic, man. And Clancy Brown really does steal the show. So let's get to the actors here. Unless you want to, before we get to that, and you share any other thoughts on that?
No, we're going to get into it.
Okay.
We already rambled on. But it is important to set all that stuff up.
Yeah. The characters and the actors that portray them are, thankfully, like you said, a step up from...
There's
the only exception is that, of course, Fred Gwynne was exceptional in the first one and really saved the movie from being a complete loss for me. Fred Gwynne is great as Judd. But I guess someone that would be almost on his level is, for me, Clancy Brown. I think you'll agree with that. Yeah. He is great, man. First of all, he really did take up the New England accent. He felt like a small town sheriff. It's
weird because, like, even as the movie went along, like even though Gwynne never was bad in the movie, he kind of reminded me of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's even a scene where he's like chasing someone in a car, which we'll get into later. And he kind of looked like him in that scene. I was like, what the? That's weird. But it was a cool little like it was cool. He was really good in the movie.
Yeah, he really did a fine job of portraying his character in a way where you don't immediately dislike him. And in fact, I never disliked him, even when his darker sides of his character came forth. You know, it was almost like he was just the right amount of real, because he wasn't cartoonishly evil until
he does get cartoonishly evil.
Spirit, but yeah, it was at the right time, man, when the spirit came into him, when he was brought back from the dead. Then he went into this, and I loved. Oh man, this was so lacking in the first one. I loved that they kept the shambling gait, and none of that stuff was in the first movie. They didn't really introduce the idea that these bodies are deteriorating. I mean, it was implied and obvious, I guess, but here it's like, even the dog, the body language of the dog was great. It limped. It gave the real impression.
It was like, again, it was there in the first one, but it was like
it was so weak, and it wasn't substantial enough. But yeah, for me, Clancy Brown took the show. I guess you would agree with that.
Yeah, he was really good. I like. Again, I was ready for you to hate it because I get why people don't like it, because it's kind of, it's odd. It's an odd film, but I like that about it. But even then, I would have made a case of Clancy Brown being really good in this.
He is fantastic. Everybody else in the cast is pretty damn great too.
The only I would say that the mom in the beginning was a little weird. In fact, the start I was like, oh no, this is gonna be bad. But thankfully it wasn't. She's only in there for a little bit. Her death scene was very, very weird acted, but she's fine later on when she appears again.
Yeah.
And then the kind of like the chubby kid, at times, like especially mostly when he's being terrorized, his acting was lacking. But it's a kid, so whatever.
I actually thought he was fucking great, because it really, and of course it's kind of like a combination of the fact that he's not a bad actor. He's just not a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
But it really contributed to who the character was. You know, kind of like a trying to fit in, but not really wanting to be part of the group. It's a small town, so that's
works,
who he is.
Yeah, it works.
It works to his favor.
It works throughout most of the movie. It's just the only time I found it weird was when he was being terrorized by Clancy Brown. It was like, well, that's not realistic, but whatever. It was just one bit, and I can't complain, because that guy in the first movie destroyed the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually liked everybody. Yeah, of course, there's a few here and there that aren't magnificent.
Whatever.
But that's fine, man. Everybody was on par. Didn't take me out of the movie. Clancy Brown, Edward Furlong. Good choice, by the way. He had just come off of Terminator 2. And they did, I guess they tried to bank in on his pseudo-fame. But he was a good choice, because he's really good at what he did. Well, I guess he's not anymore. But he was good at what he did. But yeah, man, those two characters really drove the two storylines in the movie, and of course they intermeshed and all that stuff. So they were, yeah. I mean, I don't have any complaints. You don't seem to either.
Again, the few people that were bad didn't in any way ruin the movie, so whatever.
Right. So normally we talk about action, but in terms of this movie, I mean, there's set pieces, but it's really about, since this is a horror movie, it's more about evoking a certain feeling or achieving a certain horrorness, for lack of better words.
Right.
What did you think overall about that?
I like the weird, like, kind of like dream feel that the movie gets at a point. I thought that was really good, and it worked, especially when stuff gets really bizarre at the end. It just kind of feels like a weird dream.
Yeah. Which, by the way, just to interrupt real quick, really, for me, again, added to how much the influence of the spirit was growing. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, it worked. It actually even kind of addressed a concern I had about the later half, which we'll talk about right now. So I was like, oh, that actually makes sense now that you kind of see what the events unfold, I guess. But yeah, I like that. It definitely has a weird feeling. Yeah, it set its feeling really well. I thought the atmosphere.
Yeah, it really did, and it starts off that way too. I mean, it kind of again throws you a red herring opening that makes you think, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah, there was definitely a bit where I was like, "Oh no!"
And then it turns on you, and then it really sets, like you said, it sets a very good atmosphere.
Yeah.
And this is what I think you're referring to. it's paced very differently and it's structured very differently, I should say, than your standard A to Z. Let's get from here to here, because it meanders and wanders in and out of plots and in and out of people's lives in a very non-linear sense. You know, again, with that red herring turn, like let's focus on this instead.
Yeah.
And where this takes you here, and where that
It never
and
feels it never feels weird though.
no, but that's actually, I'm saying that's to its benefit because it gives it a really unique taste.
Yeah.
Normally, if this wasn't done right, the movie would feel long and non-structured. Here, I was like, I want to be more in these people's lives, which is kind of like the feeling a novel gets you. You know, if it's written well, you want to know more about them. You want to know more about them. And this weird threat, ominous supernatural threat, is just gonna be introduced into their life. It's not about the threat, it's about them and how ultimately they react to this thing. So that I thought was great. But yeah, it does give it a very unique feeling that I think maybe some people used to movies being structured a certain way might not grasp onto or might not like. But I absolutely enjoyed it, man, because it really gave you a feeling for these characters. And be them animals or not, you know, there was even some moments which were kind of like, yeah, I can kind of relate to that or whatever, you know. So that says a lot that that structure, strange as it was at times, gave more substance to what was there, to the characters especially. And ultimately, as the film progresses, you know, and it becomes more of like that fugue-like state. It also contributes. It contributes to the threat and to the mental decay of the people.
Because it actually has a similar. It actually has a similar structure to the first movie. It's just the first movie there was nothing interesting to keep you attached.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of like, this sucks, and then at the end, the weird stuff just comes off as out of place
in the first movie.
Yeah, because of how badly it was set up.
Yeah.
So it actually has a similar setup, I think. It's just this one was actually had interesting characters that didn't suck asses like the first guy.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, okay, it's actually working this time, unlike the first movie.
Yeah. And that's where I say again, this got everything that the first one did not get right. And I bemoaned this in the first one. The passage of time is never felt in the first one. Here you feel the passage of time.
I was a little confused with the passage of time at first because of how, like it doesn't really tell you how much time's passed. You just kind of, you kind of have to pick it up. You know how there's that one scene where like he's seeing these people died and he says like, oh, this happened last week, and I was like, whoa, okay, now we're here. So it was a little weird. And I'm still not a fully 100% sure how much time passed between the beginning of the movie and the end, if I'm going to be honest with you. But it kind of helped in a weird way because it gave it that weird feeling. So I can't really complain ultimately.
The only time
but yeah, you're right. You do feel time passing.
Yeah.
It's just like I couldn't gauge exactly how much time had passed.
I mean, it does it in a way which is a lot more subtle. There is no audio cues, sans the occasional, this happened this time. There is no audio cues, but it's implied in the growth of people's relationship, i.e. the example between the two young kids and stuff like that, And him the vet setting up his shop, and the passage of time is implied, but that's not important. To me, what was important is that I felt the passage of time.
Yeah.
Versus not feeling that at all in the first one, even though obviously it was there. It was like it didn't have any impact because of that, and that in the book is one of the most important things: the passage of time and how people get used to certain things and stuff. Here, I felt that. And here was very important ultimately for Edward Furlong's character because it gave you the idea through what the actions of through what other people were going through, how slowly the spirit was influencing him and making things more acceptable for him to welcome his mother back.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Yeah,
I love that.
That was the thing. Like throughout the whole movie, I was like, I'm not exactly sure how much time is passing. And the only reason it bothered me was because in the back of my mind, I was like, I mean, you gotta get your mom in that hole, right? It's gonna be all decayed and shit. But I think it's actually addressed at the end.
Yes, it is.
So I was okay with it ultimately.
This is why I say this is a great sequel for the book. and it outshines the first the first movie by far. But it's a great sequel to the book. If you read the book and go into this movie, it's a great follow up because the rules are established and it follows the rules of the book. So in that sense, the spirit would make sense. It wouldn't care that she would be all rotted and crap. It's just about getting him in another body.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that actually makes sense in the final scene.
Yeah,
I was like,
exactly.
oh, okay, it actually makes.
Yeah.
But throughout the whole movie, I was kind of like, man, you gotta hurry up with his mom business. It's been like months, but it makes sense. So ultimately, it was bothering me throughout, but it makes sense in the end. But since I was kind of aware of that during the movie, I still kind of have to talk about it. Yeah. Even though it makes sense at the end.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So that's kind of like the action. Now let's talk about the set pieces in this, which will go kind of hand in hand with the effects, as it is a horror movie. I thought, first of all, a major upgrade from the first movie's effects, especially when in regards to the animals. Yeah. There was some really cool and unique stuff in this. Some stuff that even harkened back to like It and stuff like that. But there was some really neat stuff, and the animal work was fantastic. It never felt like a puppet, and even when it was obviously not an animal, it wasn't so jarringly unrealistic that it took me out of it. I especially thought the dead dog, Zowie, looked pretty fantastic. You know, it was a pretty good effect. And once he comes back, the animal training for the action sequence was fucking great, man. It looked good. It looked believable. The gore effects and stuff. I mean, they're not fucking top of the line, but they're definitely not fucking trash. They're very suitable, very much, in line with what's going on. I love it, and they're very subtle until kind of like the explosive end. And I say subtle as far as zombies, revenants go, but the end kind of like was like a big blow up, but. It was cool, man. It earned that, It kind of earned that. I didn't really have any issues with the effects. I thought they were great. I thought they contributed, except for one, and that is I felt that at the end when the revenant mother of Edward Furlong's character came back, and the fire around her was finally melting off her, the patch up work they did, that was cool, and her screaming, that should have been the cutaway. But then, then they hold on, and I understand why the body was still standing and stuff like that. The spirit's still strong in it, trying to keep it alive. Yeah. I get that, but it looked kind of fucking hokey. But that's okay. I'm not even caring because I was so pleased with the movie by that point.
That was that was kind of corny. I'm not gonna lie. I can't think of anything that was bad, so yeah, I'll agree.
Okay. Now let's talk about the score in this. I will say this: the first 2/3 of the movie, I absolutely love the score, and the last third, I don't hate it, but I think it went too much into a popular rock kind of sound. I liked it. Is the weird part. Yeah, I don't hate it. I really do like it, but I was really loving the first 2/3. So that kind of like that. But but you're right. I dig it. It was weird.
There was two bits where I found it weird. And it was because you get this kind of soft guitar, kind of like
a rock opera,
ambient sound type of song.
Oh yeah,
which I really liked. And then there's a scene, I don't exactly remember what the scene was, but there's a scene where suddenly there's singing along with the music, and I was like, whoa. This is weird, and it's very 80s singing.
I actually really liked that. It was
I liked it. Ultimately, I liked it, but I found it weird the first time. And then it happens again later during a sex scene. I was like, but again, it kind of helped the weird dream feel of it. But it was really bizarre the first time it happened.
The first time it happened was when Zowie the dog was dead. Yeah,
that's what it was, yeah.
And I was like, wow, because it actually was kind of moving, the everything that was happening plus the music made it moving. I mean, just the dog alone dying would be sad, but I think I really enjoyed it, man. The first 2/3, the soundtrack really sets up a mood. It's ambient, it's eerie, and then we get musical cues from the first one that worked, which was good, and especially when they go back to the Micmac burial ground and stuff like that. So that was excellent, and then they had some soundtrack selections which were really cool, like Patti Smith's shit list when Gus comes back from the
Yeah.
dead, and he's peeling the
Yeah.
bunnies. Such a great selection to say exactly what's on the mind of the spirit, as it were. I'm ready. I have a shit list. I'm gonna go do this, and I'm gonna spread my influence. That was super cool, man. But yeah, the last, even though I do like the last third, for me was
It's
like,
weird.
what
It
the
gets into
hell?
like a weird, like almost like they're just jamming out
Yeah,
type of thing.
but like you said, it does contribute.
I think maybe because I've been listening to a lot of Credence lately, and I kind of like their jamming out songs. I was kind of like, you know what? I kind of like it, and they give it like a weird. Again, it kind of gave it like that weird, like dream feel.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed, man. With the score, because especially in comparison to part one, where I was like, "Huh,
It got bad
score?"
towards the end, yeah.
So yeah, the score gets a thumbs up from both of us, apparently.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the final thing: the visual and cinematic approach to this.
Oh, this one actually had one.
Yeah, it definitely has that ambiance.
So there you go. The first one.
Yeah,
didn't.
and it really gave a good, like, kind of gloomy small town
Yeah.
feel to it. Yeah, I mean, everything just contributed to the ambiance, perfectly. And I will say this, Mary Lambert and her camera crew took a lot more risk with the camera movement, actually made it feel like if it was alive, the camera, versus super stiff, kind of like by the numbers delivery in part one. There was some really nice shots in this, some really cool little movement. I mean, nothing spectacular like, whoa, look at this, or experimental cinema over here. But
There was some like weird.
Yeah,
moments,
it was good, man. It was good that they actually, stepped out of the.
Yeah, there was some weird like camera movements, some odd like editing tricks at the end, but it all kind of helped towards that weird feeling that the movie gives.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually liked it.
All right, man. Well, we pretty much covered every single point. Let's give this final thoughts and rating. What's yours?
I liked it. Now again, I kind of understand why someone would like it, especially if you don't get what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't get what they're saying, it just comes off as hokey and bizarre. But if you kind of understand what it's trying to say, it makes sense. Clancy Brown's great. He does get a little weird, but I mean that is the spirit. But again, if you don't understand that point, I can kind of see you being like, "What the hell's happening?" That being said, I think the movie does a good job of explaining it, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. I liked it quite a bit. I would give it like an 8.
I'm the same boat, man. I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this. Again, to reiterate, I feel ashamed that I avoided this movie for so long, and I feel even more ashamed because I was actually listening to the opinion of my older brother, who doesn't know how to watch a horror movie for shit. So I should have known better, I guess. But yeah, as a fan of the book and kind of someone that was very disappointed in the adaptation of it, this is a great follow-up to the book. And it's kind of the way it should be seen, to be enjoy as much as I enjoy. I know you enjoyed it thoroughly. I enjoyed it like a fuckload. So I mean, it really did a lot to to contribute to and take from the book, which was awesome. And again, to say this, it really embodied a lot of Stephen King tropes in a way that didn't feel redundant or stupid or treading over the same ground, if you will. It did it kind of like in a respectful way and in a cool way. And Clancy Brown,
he was pretty good, man. I
was
really liked him.
freaking great. Yeah.
Also, this is kind of gay, but I'm used to seeing him with gray hair and kind of like short gray hair. And he was looking pretty good with some long brown locks. Gay moment ended.
Yep, that was pretty damn gay. But anyway, my final score for it would be a solid 9 on the horror scale. Pretty good, man. I was really impressed. Check this sequel out.
Don't see the first one.
Yeah, read the book, then see the sequel, because it really does benefit from that.
I do want to say that I found this interesting. I don't know if it was just me reading too much into the scene or being, again, slightly confused about the time passing and the mom.
Mm-hmm.
But when the mom comes back, she's not decayed at all.
Well, when the heat is her, the wax they use is melting off.
See, I didn't read
area.
it. I didn't read it as a wax thing. I kind of read it as, because at that point, the guy had attacked him, and John Connor was like, "This ain't my mommy," right? And when he kind of realized that, that's when he started decaying. So I kind of read it as like he lost his his belief in who it was
Yeah,
supposed to be, and thus it started decaying.
That's definitely part of it. The spirit does influence what you see.
Yeah, and then again, it kind of had set up the fact that he was like really in love with the idea of bringing his mom back, because of that in the movie. So that's kind of how I saw it. Like, oh, okay, now his belief is dead, and she's like decaying. And so that's why I didn't mind the whole. It's been like months. I think she's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I didn't think that's exactly what you were talking about. I thought maybe in terms of her actual wounds. But yeah, that's exactly what's going on. So you're absolutely right about that. The spirit influences what you see.
It's kind of like an
and
it
I think
thing.
it's amplified.
It was kind of like an it thing.
Where yeah, the Wendigo spirit is very much like it. It influences, it manipulates based on what you think. So yeah, you're absolutely right about that. That's exactly, and it's good. I mean, that just says the film said that without ever going, this is what's going on. So
yeah, that's kind of what I wrote. So like, again, if you're seeing the movie and you're like, why is she like perfectly fine? That's what I wrote. That's what I got from it. And apparently that is kind of what it was meant to be.
Yeah.
So have that in your head and it'll help.
And also, I mean, I think it was evident from the way the cinematography was showing things. You know, once we get to that scene, everything has that weird fuzzy, backlit, dreamlike, like you said, quality. So it's implied, I think, and I mean, you got it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That's what it was. But yeah, man, we say check this fucker out. Shocker. We might have to check out more Stephen King sequels now than we had already planned that are not based on something.
Creepshow 3, here we come.
Yeah, oh, fuck me. Yeah, well, we did Carrie 2.
Yeah.
The Rage. So I guess we'll have to do Creepshow 3.
You know what's weird? This movie kind of had like a, you know how Carrie had that like music video from the 90s, but the worst parts of it kind of feeling? This one kind of had that feeling, only it was all the good parts.
Yeah.
I was like, man, this got weird towards the end, but in a good way.
I can see that. Anyway, let us know what you think about this. If you've seen it before, if you haven't, revisit it. And if you ever wanted to know what was up, or if the little cult was right, well, check it out. Find out, because we loved it. This has been Ahab. That's the Goon Tick. And we're signing out.